why is trauma such a buzzword? Is a question I keep being asked. I think it's quite interesting when you think about fashions of thought. We move continuously through fashions of thought, and the current fashion, one of the current fashions of thought is that trauma is, you know, a really terrible thing, and that if you have trauma, you have somehow an excuse. And yes, you can shout at me. And of course, yes, awful things do happen. Problem is, awful things happen to an awful lot of people. And the art with trauma is to recognize that if it's not dealt with properly and well at the time that it happened, or as close as possible to when it happened, there will be consequences. And one of those consequences will be shame. There's a thing. If you had a childhood that included emotional, physical, sexual, intellectual, different types, there are 9 types of abuse according to the way that I work, then it's highly likely that you will have shame. Shame is a really, really interesting, intensely physical relationship to the self. It's an unbearably painful emotion to feel. It's literally unbearable to feel shame. Shame is highly toxic, and shame, I have discussed in other videos, shame has 2 immutable laws, and one is that if you have shame, you will shame. And the other one is that if you have shame, you're available to be shamed. So I'm talking about trauma as a buzzword at the moment. And I think that the problem with trauma, the focus on trauma, which is what everybody's focusing on, actually that word is so overused, I actually don't like saying it anymore. It's an interesting thing. But this focus makes everybody a victim. And it's really not a good place to be the victim. You don't really want to be the victim, because the victim is in itself a power position. And so if you're moving through the world with this idea that you have trauma, then actually what happens in essence is you have an excuse, and you have an excuse in the main to behave quite badly. And who's defining what is good or bad behavior? That's a really good question. Not me. But if you think about how would you like to be? Now that's a really interesting question. How would you like to be? I have to stop leaning on the table because I'm wiggling this thing. How would you like to be? Would you like to be peaceful, calm, kind, zen? I have no idea. How would you like to be? Would you like to be vengeful? Would you like to enact your revenge? I don't know how you'd like to be. But I think the interesting thing about having trauma is it does mean that you are a victim and everybody else has been horrible to you. And therefore, in many, many ways, you are justified in how you behave, and generally justified, probably 99.999% of the time, justified in how badly you behave. And badly is such an interesting word. But if you think about your trauma allows you perhaps to be compulsive, to be addictive, to have a whole load of disorders. I think that that's where the problem of the buzzword of trauma comes, is it makes all of the disorders like flags that are a get out of jail free card. And I think that's the problem. I know this is contentious. I really do. I get it. I think that the work that wants to be done by you, if that's you, and particularly if you're offended by what I'm saying, I think the work that needs to be done is that you want to work on your shame. Because the shame is the root. The disorders are, if you think about having a root and then the leaves and then the flowers, the flowers could be the disorder. The leaves could be the history. And the root is actually how you have acted in, how you're feeling. You've got this whole thing going on relative to having trauma. But actually, if you work on your shame, you liberate yourself. That is the key. You liberate yourself. If you're a victim, then everybody who hurt you is your prisoner. And it's boring. There's so many other things you could be doing with your time. It is such a glorious world to be in. Yes, and then you can come back to me and say, what about this and what about that? But actually, each moment, every moment that, you know, today the sun is shining, it's been pouring with rain all day, the gaps between the rain and the sun, when the sun comes out, it's so beautiful. The light coming through the plants in front of me, it's so beautiful. There are moments, endless moments of exquisite. And if you're lost in being vengeful, angry, hurt and traumatized, all of your focus is going in. And I don't think that that's a good way. I've done it. I've been there. I know. It's much more interesting to get rid of the shame, to let go of the shame. And in that, let go of all your prisoners. You know, you take everybody who harmed you, who hurt you, and also the people that you harmed and hurt. You take them all prisoner. Let them go. Come and do some work on your shame. You know, come to the shame workshop. Come to MAP. They are 2 workshops that really hold hands with each other. One generally leads into the other, and they are transformative. If you want to really change your relationship to your history and your relationship to how you show up, and very much your relationship to how you really want to be in the world, it's possible. You just have to choose.